So today is again a point where we're going to switch from graphing our hyperbolas to being able to give you information and you coming up with the equations of our hyperbolas. So a couple things you want to remember. First is the equations that we have. If our x-axis or our transverse axis is parallel with the x-axis, our x's are coming first, and it's going to be over our a squared. If the transverse axis is parallel to the y-axis, then our y's are coming first over our a squared. Recall our a squareds are always going to come first, then our b squareds are going to be second. Also remembering that a squared plus b squared equals c squared in this case. And the equation of the asymptotes. If we're parallel with the x-axis, then our y is going to equal plus or minus the b over a, where if we're transverse as our y-axis parallel, then our equation of the asymptotes is going to be y equals plus or minus a over b. Remember that these values, a and b, are going to be what's under the y value. So if our y value is first, if we're, second, then it's always going to be b over a for our asymptotes. Here our y's came first, so that's going to be a over b. So whatever goes with our y value goes first or on top with our asymptotes. Just a friendly reminder there. So let's go ahead and look and see what we're going to ask you to do today. I have 3 examples. Shouldn't take a miserable amount of time, I hope. Let's go ahead and see what we've got. So we'll write the equation of the hyperbola given our vertices, 5, -2, and -3, -2. And then our foci are going to be at 6, -2, and -4, -2. So what I like to do is go ahead and graph what we know. So we have a vertex at 5, -2, and we have a vertex at -3, -2. So that's going to be my vertices. I know if these are my vertices, then this is going to be my transverse axis. So it's going to be parallel with the x-axis. So I know already, if I want to go ahead and start out with my general equation, it's going to look like, now we have some quantity squared over our a minus some quantity squared over our b squared equals 1. We know that our x's are going to come first because we know that we're opening with the x-axis. We're parallel with the x-axis as our transverse axis. So we're going to have x and then we're going to have our y. As well, we can go ahead and find the center between these 2 points. So I can go ahead and count if I want. I have 5, I have 8 units, so I know I'm 4 units from each of those. So my vertex, or the center in this case, is going to be at the point 1, -2. So I can go ahead and put that in, x minus 1, and then y plus 2. Those are the easy ones, huh? That also tells me, though, our a value. Our a value is going to be 4 units. So I know that a squared is going to equal 16. I can go ahead and also find my b value then. Well, go ahead and label our foci, I guess. So our foci are going to be at 6, -2, and -4, -2. So I know that my hyperbola is going to look something like this. Again, we don't need to necessarily be perfect on it, but it's going to look something of that form. So I know my a value there. I also can find my b value. My b value has the relationship a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I know a squared is 16. I know c squared is the distance, my c is the distance from the center out to the one of the foci. So I have 5 units there, so that's going to be 25. Remember, 5 squared gives me 25, the distance from the center to the foci, one of the foci. So then b squared is going to equal there, so b squared then in this case is going to equal 9. So I'll have 9 units there. And that's going to be my equation of my hyperbola. They do get much more complicated, and they can get that way, I guess, in kind of a hurry. So here we have a transverse axis is vertical with a central rectangle. Remember that central rectangle tells us our asymptotes. And we have the center at 2, 3. So let's go ahead and kind of label what we have, kind of plot things out. We have that point 2, 3. We have a transverse axis is vertical. So we know that we're going to go through this point here, and our foci are going to lie on that transverse as well. So if we know that, we can go ahead and set up our equation, I suppose. We know that since it opens up and down, our y is going to come first and our x is coming second. So our y value of the center is going to be at 3, and our x value is going to be at 2. Now we do is find our a and our b value. Well, we know that we're 6 units. The central rectangle is 6 units by 4 units. So if I have 6 units, it doesn't tell me I'm coming up 6 units. It tells me that from the center, I'm going to have 6 units total. So I'm going to come up 3 units, and I'm going to come down 3 units. So that's going to be that part of the rectangle, and it's going to be 4 units left and right. So again, I'm going to divide that in half. I'm going to have 2 by 2. So here's going to be that rectangle that we created for our asymptotes. Well, that also tells us then our a value and our b value. So our a value in this case is going to be the distance from the center out to the vertex. In this case, it's 3. So our a value is going to be a squared, or 9. Our b value is the distance left or right from that vertex. So we're going to have 2 units in this case, so that squared gives us 4. So our equation is going to be y minus 3 squared over 9 minus x minus 2 squared over 4 equals 1. My last one here, I have the foci that we're going to give you as at 4 plus or minus the square root of 85, comma negative 1. And our asymptotes are given there as well. So remember, our asymptotes are talking about either our a is being 7 and our b is 6, or vice versa, since that we're just looking at the slope there. The other part really doesn't matter a whole lot to us at this point. So what do we do with this foci, the foci here that they're telling us? 4 plus or minus the square root of 85, comma negative 1. Well, that tells us kind of a lot about it. This negative 1, I know that I'm going to be on this line of negative 1. I'm changing the x value. So I know the transverse axis is going to be y equals negative 1. Take a second to make sure that makes sense to us. Since we know that we're changing the x value, the only way we're going to change the x value is by adding or subtracting the square root of 85. So that y value won't change. So we'll have 2 points, and those 2 points will both have the y value being at negative 1. So that tells me where my transverse axis is. So I know I'm going to be opening up to the left and to the right. So I already know what's going to come first. Since I open up with the x-axis, I know that my x's are coming first and my y's are coming afterwards. All right. What else do I know? Well, I know that my center has to be on negative 1 for the y value, so I'm going to put that in. More importantly, I'm taking the square root of 85, I'm adding it to 4, and I'm subtracting it from 4. So I know my my center has to be at 4, negative 1. So I know my x value, or my x coordinate, is going to be x minus 4 squared over something minus 1y plus 1 squared. Since I have my a values, or my b values under my y, I know my b then is going to be 7, and my a value is going to be 6. But we have to be careful with this because we know that a squared plus b squared has to equal our c squared. Our c value is going to be what's over here. So if I square that, I get 85. So I have to have a ratio between the squares of 7 and 6 to get those squareds added together to give me 85. Well, what's that going to look like? Well, I can go ahead and try my a value of being 6 and my b value being 7. And does that equal 85? Does 36 plus 49 equal 85? In this case, it does. Yay! We have our a value and we have our b value. It's not always going to work out that way. This 7:6 could be a reduced ratio. So that 7:6 could be, or could have come from 14/12. It could have come from 21/18. So what you're going to possibly have to do is square both of these and add them to make sure that we get the number of our c value squared. So in our case, it just happened that 6 squared plus 7 squared gives us that 85. But if this 85 was the next larger number up, it would have been 12 squared plus 14 squared to give us that value. So be careful, because we could see that ratio as you work in on your assignments. So that's going to give you an idea of what it's going to look like to be able to write the equation given some information about a hyperbola. If you have questions, by all means, give me a holler and we'll talk through it. Good luck and enjoy.